Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome in, GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Today we're doing the National League East as we continue our division-by-division breakdown of all of Major League Baseball. Spring training is rolling. Well, kind of rolling. We're seeing some pictures of guys in uniforms. The media days are happening. Pitchers and catchers are off and running. And games get started in terms of spring training games in about 5 days from the day this was recorded, on the 22nd. A lot of Major League Baseball will have games to play, which is super exciting at the end of the month of February. Obviously snowing outside right now, at least in the north. It's been snowing a lot of the weekend. Got down to 0 degrees, -4 real feel last week here in Chicago. And it was chilly, really chilly. But baseball warms us up always. Today we're doing the NL East. We did the NL West last week, and the NL Central the week before that. Check out those podcasts for my full breakdown and full predictions. But just to recap, so we understand where we are with the National League, because this will complete the National League. In the NL West, I have the Dodgers winning 110 games and winning the division. I have the Arizona Diamondbacks finishing at 78-82. I have the Rockies at 75-87. And I have the San Francisco Giants at 59-105. In terms of the NL Central, I have the Pirates at the bottom with 60-102. So 60 wins, 102 losses for the Pittsburgh Pirates. For the Brewers, my prediction 85-77. For the St. Louis Cardinals, 88-74. For the Cubs, I think they fall to 500 after selling at the deadline. They'll fall to 81-81 in my eyes. And a prediction for the Reds, 91-71. So I have the Dodgers and Reds as the division champion. And right now, the top two wild card contenders, without including the National League East, the St. Louis Cardinals at 88 wins, and that's the list. It'd be St. Louis, and then it would be Milwaukee as the two teams to get in the wild card. One of those two teams will be removed from the wild card by the National League East. I think the National League East and National League Central will be the two divisions with two playoff teams in it. The National League West, I just don't see any of those teams being better than the top four teams in both the National League East and National League Central. I think it's Dodgers, then 8 NL East, NL Central teams, then the last two teams, then it's the rest of the National League West, and then it's all the bottom teams, the Marlins, the Pirates. And in the National League East, it's the Marlins, the Pirates, and the National League West, it's a collection of bad teams. Specifically, the San Francisco Giants going to lose about 100 games this year. So let's go ahead and get through this National League East. We'll start from the bottom of the PECOTA rankings, which is a projection system by Baseball Prospectus. We'll work our way up through those rankings. We'll talk about each of these teams, their projected lineups, projected rotations, and why I give the prediction I give. And what I do is I give a range of wins. So worst case scenario, best case scenario. In PECOTA and all these simulations, they do that as well, but the only prediction they report to you is the average result of all their simulations. Then they have a set of results that are one standard deviation away and two standard deviations away. It's called a bell curve. Take statistics. You'll learn all about it. Essentially, it's just running a bunch of simulations. There's a worst case and there's a best case. And I do realistic worst case, realistic best case. I try not to account injuries in because, to be honest, everybody's worst case is going to be about 5-6 games below what I give, because there might be a rash of injuries, and we see that in baseball all the time. And in the other direction, the best case, you don't know if there's free agent pickups or somebody from the minor leagues comes up. But when we look at these rosters, you ask a lot of if questions. If this happens, then this happens. And if there's too many of them, you lower and lower the ceiling. So I looked through the entire National League East. We'll start with the bottom. It's going to be the Miami Marlins this year. Marlins added a couple of interesting pieces in the lineup to where their lineup went from, that's just horrific, to, it could kind of hit, I guess. I mean, you've got Jonathan VR they added. They added Jesus Aguilar as well. And those two guys both should be over 800 OPS this year. VR might get over. But there's just no big bat. Corey Dickerson's going to bat cleanup in this lineup. When you've got Corey Dickerson batting cleanup, it's just not a good look for the Miami Marlins. So the lineup is meh at best. It's a below-average lineup in Major League Baseball. But it might sneak into the top 20 in terms of runs scored. Maybe. If some of these guys pan out well, if they hit more home runs than expected. So maybe some of these guys end up in the top 20. And combine that with their puke-worthy rotation, their number one ace projected this year is a man named Caleb Smith, who I'll be frank, I had not heard of Caleb Smith much before doing a lot of research on the Marlins. And the reason for that is he's turning 28. This will only be his fourth season in the big leagues, and he has not had an ERA below 4 a single year of his career. His debut season in 18 innings pitched, he had a 7.70 ERA. 16 games pitched his second year, 4.19, and last year in his first full season, a 4.52 ERA. And I just don't see a 28-year-old starter that's been unable to get under a 4 ERA that took forever to get into Major League Baseball getting much better than he is now. And that's pretty much the only hope for the Marlins in terms of any sort of competent rotation. And then you go to the bullpen, and it's even worse for the Miami Marlins. One guy is projected under a 4 ERA, and it's Brandon Kintzler, who's supposed to be their closer. And it's a 3.81 projection by Roto World. It's not exactly impressive. Kintzler, a guy that's turning 35, just coming off his best relief season. And let me ask you this. How many guys have had their best relieving season as a relief pitcher between the ages of 30 and 35? How many guys have the next year been just as dominant as a relief pitcher? It doesn't happen often. The Reds had a bunch of relievers that would have a great season at age 33, and then you expect that type of production to replace itself going into the next year, and it never does. They usually find it one in the tank. Everybody gets a scouting report on them. Their fastball loses some speed. They suffer some sort of injury throughout the year. So the fact that that's their best reliever, a 35-year-old coming off his best season, is another horrific sign for the Miami Marlins. Combine all those facts, and that is why the Miami Marlins, according to Pacoda, are expected to be 71-90. Roto World has them at 69-93. They're coming off a 57-win season in 2019. So here's my range. Let's say the lineup finds a couple of gems, go over 800 OPS. Somebody has their best year, gets close to 900 OPS. They're top 20 in the league. They win a bunch of one-run games, right? Bunch of one-run games go the Marlins' direction. Maybe the division above them is worse than we are all thinking it's going to be. And, they piece a lot of things together. There's a minor league prospect we haven't heard about that does really well. I could see this Marlins team, if everything goes right, getting 78 wins this year. That's not where you want your ceiling to be, I'll tell you that. That is actually where the floor is for the rest of the division. There are very few universes, I believe, that exist where the Marlins do not finish in last place in the NL East this year. They are by far and away the favorite to finish last in the National League East. So 78 wins the ceiling. The floor for me, for the Miami Marlins, 55 wins. 55 wins is the floor. I think they're a better team than they were last year. And they hit 57 last year. So it's just hard for me to put the floor any lower than 55 wins. It's pretty rough once you get below 55. You're in some serious bad team territory. And it just feels like the Marlins just adding a couple bats. I think they'll get to 59 wins this year. So my official prediction for the Miami Marlins, 59-103. You're relying on a 28-year-old starting pitcher who's never been below a 4 ERA and only has 3 seasons as a pitcher in the big leagues in Caleb Smith. That's your opening day starter, Miami. That's a rough look. And then your best reliever, a closer, is 35 coming off his best season as a reliever. His only season in his career as a relief pitcher below a 3 ERA in Kintzler. There's no pieces here for Miami to make any sort of run. And that's why I put them on my cross them off list. They are a team you can already cross off for winning the World Series. I gave 7 of those teams. And the Pacoda rankings actually agreed with all 7 of those teams, except they would have included the Rangers on that list as well, as teams below 1.5% chance to make the playoffs. On the other side of the break, we'll keep flying through this division. Marlins fans had to get through it, 59-103. It is what it is. It's kind of hard to take swings and try to get better in free agency when you look up at all these teams that are better than you in the division and your pitching staff is so far away. It's going to be about youth development. It's going to be about finding the right pieces if you're Miami. Hopefully some young guys develop and look better this year. And your dream scenario, honestly, is getting to 69, 70, 71 wins, which some of the projections have you at. And you don't lose 100 games and you feel decent about next year. Maybe some of the teams above you fall off and you can take a swing at free agency and make a run at the National League East in the next 2 years or so. On the other side of the break, we'll talk about the Philadelphia Phillies. A lot of big names: Joe Girardi, Bryce Harper, Didi Gregorius. Phillies fans are excited. I think I'm going to damper those excitements on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Marlins, 59 wins. Book it. Won't be much better. See, the bad teams, honestly, the bad teams in baseball are much easier to predict. It's just, the rosters just don't, there's nothing there. There's nothing you can really say or do or think about if you're a fan of those teams. And listen, I'm a Reds fan, grew up in Ohio. I've had those seasons. It's been like the last 5 years where I say, well, if we win 85 games. And if you're asking 8, 9 ifs out of your team and you're only thinking you can win 85, just forget about it. It's going to be a rough year. The Philadelphia Phillies are in a really interesting position. I want to shift to them next. So the Phillies are a team that went 81-81 in 2019 in Bryce Harper's first year, while Bryce Harper's former team and division rival of the Philadelphia Phillies, Washington Nationals, got better at hitting in the outfield and won the World Series without him. So PR nightmare for Bryce Harper. Really a PR nightmare for every guy asking for a 10-plus year contract. It's truly just a rough, like Mookie Betts, his negotiations with the Dodgers, they can use Bryce Harper as an example, man. You know, we don't necessarily need you. And the Red Sox got to point at Bryce Harper as an example of why they didn't want or need Mookie Betts as a 10, 12-year contract when they weren't even going to be competitive with him this season in the American League East. But the Philadelphia Phillies, they're in this position. Get this, $700 million the Philadelphia Phillies have put into free agents over the last 3 seasons. They have thrown money at this thing. They believe in their analytics system. They've thrown money at their manager. Joe Girardi comes in. They've thrown money at a pitching coach, Brian Price, who's come in. And you take a look at the Philadelphia Phillies Pacoda projections. So $700 million. We've got Joe Girardi. Bryce Harper's in the lineup. And I want to read this lineup to you guys. And I just think, don't worry about statistics or anything. Just think about what you at home know about baseball. And just know about the names. I'm going to read the lineup. I'm going to read the starters. And I want you to just have that thought in your brain about what you think this Phillies team will be. Andrew McCutchen, leading off after he recovers from an ACL. JT Realmuto, Bryce Harper, Rhys Hoskins, Didi Gregorius, Gene Segura, Scott Kingery, and Adams Hazley rounding out the back end. It's not a bad lineup. You've got guys that are really hyped. Didi Gregorius, former Yankee, always been a high-level prospect. He has some good range in the infield, can hit some. Hoskins has hit a lot of home runs before. Bryce Harper's been an MVP. Realmuto's been one of the best hitting catchers in the National League over the past few years. And Andrew McCutchen's an MVP. So, okay, pretty exciting. Now the starters. Aaron Nola. He's been below a 3 ERA before. Zach Wheeler. Some people say he has the stuff like Garrett Cole. Jake Arrieta. Yeah, that's a big name. Cubs fans will remember Jake Arrieta. Vincent Velasquez and Zach Eflin. Not exactly great starters on the back end, but they've been productive at times. And you just listen to the names, and you just take the genericness you know about baseball and just some of the things you hear about players. Man, the Phillies might win this division. Joe Girardi's the manager, $700 million in free agents. Zach Wheeler's coming in. But every time you dive and look at the numbers, really look at them underneath the microscope, the Philadelphia Phillies just don't feel like a team that can win this division this year. There certainly is a world where it happens, but it will be reliant on the Mets, the Braves, and the Nationals having bad seasons. Things going wrong for them. Them being closer to their floor than we expect them to be. Because the Phillies just go player by player, lineup through lineup, rotation through rotation, bullpen pieces through bullpen pieces. And the Phillies just don't have the dudes. They sound good. They sound nice. Their price tag is high. But in reality, they aren't better than any other team in this division. Now, their ceiling and other teams' floors can kind of cross each other, and the Phillies end up winning the division. And they better win the division this year if I'm ownership, spending $700 million over the last 3 years, or else there's going to be real big changes in Philadelphia. Now, the PECOTA rankings, they see the same thing I see. And they're actually a little lower on the Phillies than I am. They see the Phillies as a 76-win team, 85 losses. Roto World, the composite rankings, sees them as a 78-84 ball club. If you're Philadelphia, that's a scary proposition. 78-84 when you spend $700 million over the last 3 years. And when we talked about the NL Central, I talked about how the team that wins the offseason usually doesn't win the season when I talked about the Cincinnati Reds. But I explained in picking the Reds as the division winner why their spending money in the offseason felt different. One, it's a plan I knew they had for a long time. The Reds have been working on this plan since I had a chance to visit Great American Ballpark in a media assembly in January 2-3 years ago. I knew they were working on it then. They were working on it before then. This has been the plan for a long time for the Reds. And they've slowly, year by year, added a piece, added a prospect, made this move, made that move. They got Eugenio Suarez out of it, Alfredo Simon. They just make these small little additions, small little changes, and small little adds. And you knew that they weren't going to swing big until they found the right moment to swing big. While the Phillies, on the other hand, really haven't built up any sort of farm system, haven't made any frugal moves, haven't made any moves that excite you, that are smart, and they've just thrown money at this thing. They're the team that wins the offseason that doesn't win the season. The Reds feel like the team that wins the offseason that does win the season. And there's examples like this all over sports in the NFL, right? The Philadelphia Eagles, remember when they were a dream team, as Vince Young said, they had all these great players, and Nnamdi Asomugha on the corner, and they just threw money at the problem. Didn't really do it smartly, just signed like the 5 biggest free agents, and they all came to Philly. Same city, too. This is a weird coincidence. That team didn't work out. They finished 8-8. But the New York Giants, you remember one year with Odell Beckham. When they had Odell Beckham at his peak and Eli Manning, they threw money at the places they needed on defense. And they ended up 11-5 and in the playoffs. Very similar thing in baseball. I think the Reds are more like the Giants. And I think the Phillies are more like their Philadelphia counterpart, the Eagles. And it's just such a rough city to spend that much money and be bad at. Because the city of Philadelphia, it's brotherly love. But man, you got to earn that stuff. And if you're making a bunch of money and you're not performing up to that money, Bryce Harper, Zach Wheeler, pressure's on him. This guy hasn't been below a 3 ERA. They signed him to a long-term deal. A lot of pressure in Philly. I don't like pressure. Pressure is not good for baseball teams. Unnecessary pressure. It's a long season. You need to be relaxed. Now, Joe Girardi, manager of the Yankees, former manager of the Yankees, he would be the type of guy to relieve this pressure. But how special was Joe Girardi? I mean, yeah, great manager, but how special? Special enough to elevate this team? I'm not sure. Brian Price, listen, I know the numbers look good for all those Reds rotations. I'm just not sure I trust the guy as a head coach or any sort of coach in Major League Baseball anymore. So we'll see if that works out for the Phillies. My floor for this team is 73 wins. They've got enough talent here, and with Bryce Harper on the roster, Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler, there's just no real universe I see this team winning less than 73. Unless they sell a bunch at the deadline, which they won't. They could be 10 games out, and this ownership group is going to throw some more money at it, throw some more prospects at it, and they'll keep swinging until the end of the season. That seems like the mode the Phillies are in. So 73 wins the floor. But if everything goes right, Bryce Harper's an MVP, Hoskins hits 30 home runs, McCutchen comes back, he's healthy, isn't necessarily MVP Andrew McCutchen, but pretty good Andrew McCutchen. That productivity that the Phillies saw last year before he tore his ACL. Right, your bullpen is better, the back end of the rotation helps out, Zach Wheeler finds its groove. This team can win 91 games. 91 games, and that could win the division, but it depends on the Nationals, depends on the Mets, and depends on the Braves. We'll talk about the Braves on the other side of the break. My official prediction for the Phillies, though, in between 73 and 91 wins, I think they'll win 83 games. 83 and 79. They do some unnecessary trade at the deadline that won't help them win the division. Some things work out. I think Bryce Harper has a bounce-back year. I do think that Wheeler will get better in this type of system. I think Joe Girardi's a good manager. I think they'll figure some things out, and they'll win 83 games. They'll be in a wild card race. Important games in Philadelphia are coming in September, but they'll miss out on the playoffs at 83 and 79. On the other side of the break, we talk about the Atlanta Braves. They were the division champion and the second-best team in the regular season in the National League last year. How will they do this season? We'll talk about it on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
GSMC Baseball Podcast. Welcome back into the show. Follow us on Twitter at GSMC_baseball. Would love to have your follow. You can find episodes of the show posted there. Check out the rest of the GSMC Podcast Network. For all your favorite types of podcasts, we have almost everything. Truly. But we're talking about the National League East, which I said the National League Central might be the best division in baseball when I went through this. Dove deeper into the National League East, preparing for the show today. I think the National League East is a better division. Just compare team by team, right? You have the top four in the National League Central. The Reds, I feel like are the best team, but their ceiling is not as high as the Braves, as the Mets, as the Nationals. It just every ceiling is higher in the National League East than the National League Central. And the floors are about the same. Like the National League East could have the best team outside of the Dodgers in the NL, certainly. There's three of them in running for that. In the NL Central, I think only the Cardinals and Reds are in true running for that. You can make an argument for the Cubs. It's close. The NL Central might end up being better this year, but it's awfully close. I gave the Phillies an 83 and 79 prediction, the Marlins a 59 and 103. We move on to the Atlanta Braves, 97 and 65 a year ago. And their lineup looks pretty good. Ronald Acuna, Ozzie Albies, Freddie Freeman, Marcell Ozuna, Nick Markakis, Travis d'Arnaud. That's a pretty good front six. You got guys who can have it over 900 OPS, coupled with a potential 1,000 OPS in their system. Freddie Freeman, Acuna certainly. And Marcell Ozuna, he's a guy that opted out of a 3-year, $50 million deal with the Cincinnati Reds. who's going to add another outfield piece, which I don't know what they would have done if they added Ozuna. Honestly, if they add Ozuna, it makes it much easier to go out and get Francisco Lindor if you're the Cincinnati Reds, which Indians fans can clamor all they want that that's not happening. But Ozuna had that deal done with the Reds, and then the Braves come in, and they say, hey, 1 year, 18. It's more money per year. Bet on yourself. And Ozuna bets on himself and comes here. So you've got a guy motivated on a contract here. And this rotation, Cole Hamels is hurt right now, but this rotation has some serious potential. Mike Soroka is young and coming off a really good season. He has ace potential at the top of this rotation. And the bullpen for the Atlanta Braves, it's not half bad. Mellon Kahn bringing up the rear, Shane Green, Will Smith, Luke Jackson. These guys have had some success. Chris Martin, Darren O'Day, Grant Dayton. These are good relief pitchers. These are guys who you can rely on in key situations. I like the Atlanta Braves. I like looking at their roster, which is why it surprised me when you look at their PECOTA projection. 82 wins, 79 losses by PECOTA, 85 and 77, so a little better than Roto World. And I don't really see where these numbers are coming from. Maybe there isn't an elite level closer. Maybe the back end of the lineup isn't as good. Maybe we're overvaluing the explosiveness of the Atlanta Braves. And maybe the departures for the Braves were a little more impactful than we thought they were. But to me, this is still a good team. This is still a team that should compete for this division and will have every opportunity to win it. I think they're a playoff team in the National League. I mean, Soroka, young ace. You have Cole Hamels, a veteran, as the number 2 once he gets healthy to come in. Now, when is he healthy? That's the true question. And the lineup just has that front-loaded boppers that can change everything. All you need is at third base, Camargo, a guy projected at 7.72 OPS, which isn't bad. Let's say Camargo goes off this year, hits 20 home runs at the back end of that lineup. Something like that happening. Boom, this Braves team can be really special. A 90-plus win team. That's why I have their ceiling as we move to the Lukas range. My ceiling is a 96-win ball club. I think the Dodgers are going to eat a lot of wins in the National League, so I've ticked everybody down a bit. In their own division, I ticked everybody down about 3 or 4 wins because I think the Dodgers are so much better than everybody else. And everywhere else around the National League, I ticked everybody down about 1 or 2 wins because I think the Dodgers are going to eat a lot of wins from everybody in the National League. When you have a team that's that dominant, has the potential to win 110, 115 games, they're going to affect everybody when they come through the schedule. And that can kind of shift things in each division. So that's why I've downshifted everybody about 1 and 2 wins. I think the Braves can certainly win 96 games as their ceiling this year if everything goes right. If everything goes wrong for the Atlanta Braves, I have them at 78 wins. And the go-wrong scenario, your young guys just don't develop the same way you thought. Soroka has an off year for some odd reason. All those veteran relief pitchers start to have their worst year, which can certainly happen with all those old names you heard in their bullpen. I mean, Melicon's been around forever. O'Day's been around forever. So they have their worst season. And you end up winning 78 games. That's on the table for the Atlanta Braves, especially in this type of division. It just takes a little bit of a slip up, and the Phillies and the Nationals and the Mets could eat you alive. So the floor, 78 wins for the Atlanta Braves. The ceiling, 96. Where do I think the Braves will land? I think they end up at 92 wins. 92 wins for the Atlanta Braves this year. I think they win a close division race. I think the Atlanta Braves are going to win the National League East this year. Why? I trust the Braves organization, one. They've been winning a lot, especially in the regular season. And I just look at the front end of the lineup. Freddie Freeman could be an MVP. Seriously. They've got 3 potential MVPs at the front half and a guy that could hit 40 home runs in Ozuna in the middle of the lineup, and then Markakis and d'Arnaud to protect them. 2 guys that could do really well this year also. And the rotation, you've got a guy with Cy Young potential in Mike Soroka at the top of the rotation. If this kid figures it out, you're in serious business. 2.68 ERA as a 21-year-old in 174 innings. So he figures this thing out even more. 2.4, 2.3 ERA. Cole Hamels comes back healthy. I really like this Atlanta Braves roster. I really like this Atlanta Braves team. Plus, they have a reason to get better. You look at the morale of baseball teams, who's gotten better over the offseason. It's such a hard thing to project. But think about how the Atlanta Braves season ended. Before they even had the second out in the deciding game, they were down 7 runs. And you're looking around, that's a motivating factor when you won 97 games. Everybody looks around and says, let's do this again. Especially the roster is young, hungry, ready to go. I think the Braves will win the National League East this year. That's my prediction at 92-70. The team that finishes third, we'll talk about them on the other side of the break. Some might be surprised that they're third. This is the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
GSMC Baseball Podcast. Big welcome into the show. We've went through the National League East. We've got 2 teams to go, the Mets and the Nationals. To recap the predictions so far, I think the Atlanta Braves win the National League East at 92-70, which would be 5 less wins than last season. I think they can get up to 96 wins. I think the Phillies will finish at 83-79, but could fall to 73 wins or get up to 91 wins. I think the Miami Marlins finish at 59-103. 2 teams left to go through, and the one we're going to go through is the one that finishes third, and that's the Washington Nationals. Defending World Series champion Washington Nationals, 93-69 in 2019. They struggled to start the year, but then back half on, they were one of the best teams in baseball, and they made comeback after comeback after comeback in the playoffs. In fact, they trailed in 7 straight games and won all 7. Absolutely incredible run from the Washington Nationals. It's one of the most incredible runs we've seen from a team in a very, very long time in Major League Baseball. It was miracle-like. It was fantastic. It was elating for an organization and a franchise that had been searching for that type of glory for so long, for a franchise that lost its most famous player it's ever had in Bryce Harper. It felt like all was lost for the Nationals. And then every single game, it felt like all was lost for the Washington Nationals. And then somehow, some way, they go in as a wild card. They thought they were going to be the best team in the division, too. Here come the Braves out of nowhere, 97 wins. And then they get the wild card, trail in that game, win that one. Trail, win. Play the Astros, who had the most WAR returning of any team ever, beat them too. An incredible run. The problem with incredible runs like that, where everything seems against you, where it's so monumentous for the organization, where it's so game-changing for everybody involved, there's a lot of guys on the Washington Nationals that were looking for a championship. It wasn't like they brought in a bunch of champions and then said, hey, let's get this done for the Nationals. It was a bunch of guys looking for a championship. Adam Eaton, young guy, looking for a championship, got one. Right? Trey Turner, out of nowhere, got one. Strasburg, Scherzer, all these guys were looking for championships, and they got one. The reason I say all that is that's not a good thing heading into the next season. Not in this game. Not when everybody else is working their tail off. Not when the best team in the division from a year ago got absolutely embarrassed in the postseason and has been working every single day. It's not a good thing when you are relying on a little bit of an older rotation. Scherzer getting up there. Strasburg's still fairly young. But guys with some innings on them who pitched all the way in October, who pitched in a lot of intense scenarios. I think the Nationals take somewhat of a downturn this year. It's that post-World Series, we're in a really good division, and it it's just not there for everybody. I think everybody's going to fall just a bit short of their projections. I don't think Eaton's going to do as well. I don't think Trey Turner will make the jump that you think he can make. Juan Soto, I don't think will make the jump he could possibly make. Now, this Nationals team, what positions them well is I think they're going to be a good team this year. I think they'll finish third in this really good division. And they're set up well for the future. They can maneuver. They can be the National League East champion in 2021, certainly. So my range for the Nationals, Pacoda is high on the Nationals. 87 wins is their projection for the Washington Nationals. RotoWorld has them at 88 wins. Both of those things have this team finishing second, the Washington Nationals. I have them finishing third behind the Mets and the Braves. Braves winning the division at 92. We'll get to my Mets prediction on the other side of the break. But the Nationals I have as an 84-78 team this year, which is not a bad record whatsoever. 84-78, you're slow in spots, you don't do well in one-run games, guys haven't reached their ceiling like you thought. You lost Anthony Rendon, that's a big loss in the offseason. You're in this World Series hangover, and you're a really good division, and it happens in sports. Now, this Nationals team could totally prove me wrong, though. That's why I put their ceiling at 96 wins and their floor at 78. The same floor and ceiling as the Atlanta Braves. That's how close I think these teams are. If everything goes wrong for the Nationals this year, it's a 78-win team. Everything goes right, they can certainly win 96 games. Scherzer, Strasburg, just read the names. Talent is certainly there for the Washington Nationals to get to 96. But I think they'll finish at 84-78 this year. Solid year for the Nationals. They'll be competitive in September. They'll be in a race, and they just won't be able to get it done when it's all said and done. And Nationals fans, are they really going to be upset? No. They were desperate for that World Series. So it's one of those situations, and it's one of those things. You come off the highest of highs, the most miraculous type of victory. One you didn't even expect. You grind it. You work for it. You defy all the storylines. And then you finally win it. That elation, that high, is usually followed by some sort of a crash to where it's hard to get up and play another 162-game season in a tough division. Now, if the Nationals switch the Dodgers and the Nationals would win the National League West. They just have more talent than everybody. But it's not the case here. There's two teams with probably more talent. One team you can argue with similar talent in the Phillies. And when you're in that competitive a division, every inch matters. Every second spent in the offseason matters. Every inning those starters threw in October matters. And I think the little things will get the Nationals this year. And they'll finish at 84-78. But Nationals fans will still be happy, still be celebrating, as they should be. Winning a World Series like that is absolutely miraculous, absolutely incredible. The Mets offseason has been the opposite of incredible. A team that wasn't involved in the Astros cheating scandal lost their manager in Carlos Beltran. They had to bring in Luis Rojas. So what's he going to be able to do with this New York Mets team in 2020? I talk about the New York Mets, who are the favorite by Pacoda and RotoWorld to win this division. We'll talk about the Mets and what I think will happen to them in 2020 on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Podcast Network.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Still going through the National League East on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. This will complete our National League. We'll do the American League over the next 3 shows. And then we'll be deep into spring training. There'll be plenty of storylines to get into day by day. But this will complete the National League, and this is our last team we're breaking down in the National League, and it's the New York Mets. Interesting that the Mets found their way into the headlines this offseason because of this cheating scandal. Their manager fired before he even got to manage a game in Carlos Beltran. And I'm not sure I would have liked him as a manager, to be honest. I didn't know if I really agreed with the hire. But you know what? They made it, and then it's disappointing that he doesn't even get to manage a game to prove me right or prove me wrong. And they had to make a change. They go to a bench coach, Luis Rojas, a guy who's been in their minor league system, a guy who was the relative of Moises and Felipe Alou, so major league locker room experience from Luis Rojas. He's a 30-year-old, so he's this mix of new analytics and yet old baseball head because he's been around these types of locker rooms. And we talked about the hiring on this show, and I said I liked it. I did like the choice by the New York Mets to hire Luis Rojas. When something like that happens in the midst of an offseason, I don't care how much you think managers matter in the sport of baseball or not. When something like that happens in the offseason, the number one thing that we should look at as commentators and I can never say that word. I'm not even going to try. As commentators is the manager. When there's drama, when there's uneasiness, can Luis Rojas be a calming force? Can he guide? Can he get guys out of slumps? Can he just be there? Doesn't really need to change the lineup much. Doesn't need to really adjust the rotation because the Mets have a really good team here. Can he just guide them? Guide them through a tough division. Guide them through a 4-game losing streak. Guide them and lead them to winning streaks, right? Just kind of being that guiding force. That's so much of being a manager in 2020. It's not necessarily about firing up guys. It's just being there. Getting guys out of slumps. Knowing when to say the right thing. Knowing how to talk to them about their families. Knowing how to connect with them as a human. Get them to want to come to work every single day. That's so important in baseball. Because in football, man, it's so different. You're working to Sunday, right? You show up, we're getting through this, we have to install this game plan. And you want to appease guys, you want them to be ready to play. But football players are going to hit each other on Sundays. Bottom line. Everybody's going to try really hard. Especially when you're getting paid that level of money. Especially when every snap is put on tape. But in baseball, it's like a day-to-day job, man. You got to play every day. So think about your job. If you've had a great boss, it's so much easier to come to work every day. You're a little more excited about it. Your productivity goes up. Same thing in baseball. You have to come to work every day. Can a manager be that solid, positive, guiding force? Know when to use negativity. And Dusty Baker is honestly one of the best I've seen at this. Because Dusty, in terms of strategy, isn't exactly the best manager I've ever seen. Many would say he's pretty down there. But why does every single team he has have success? It's because guys play close to their best of the ability. Veterans know how to teach rookies. Dusty really likes to emphasize that. Teach young guys. Dusty brings a locker room together, and he brings the best out of every single guy in each of those locker rooms. And if Luis Rojas can be that, some sort of that, the Mets could win 96 games this year. That's my ceiling for them. The same as the Nationals, the same as the Braves. I think that's how close these three teams are. They have the same ceiling and same floor, 78 wins to 96. I think they're neck and neck. And when you look through each of the rosters agree with the idea that these teams are neck and neck. What I love about the Mets is the pitching staff. Oh, my Lord, there's some talent. Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard, Marcus Stroman, Steven Matz, Rick Porcello. Professional Rick Porcello at the back end of this rotation. And the bullpen's so good, they signed Dylan Betances, who is, he's obviously the starter, right? No, he's actually projected to be a setup man. They don't know if they can start him because they got Edwin Diaz and Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha and Walker Lockett and Familia in that bullpen. It's just a great bullpen. It's a great pitching staff. It's an exciting pitching staff. It might end up being the best pitching staff in the National League, this side of the Dodgers. It could even be better than the Dodgers in some sort of scenarios. The Mets have a lot on the mound. When you got a lot on the mound, your ceiling's pretty high. And when you look at the lineup, I'm not exactly thrilled by it, but it's good enough. Pete Alonso coming off a 53 home run year. Brandon Nimmo at the top of the lineup. He's an underrated outfielder. Gets on base. Solid player. Jeff McNeil at third. Solid player. Good for 20-plus home runs. J.D. Davis is in this lineup. Michael Conforto. Robinson Cano. Hey, you never know. Great season from Robinson Cano out of nowhere. Flashback to the good old years of Robinson Cano. Pete Alonso keeps up his success, gets on base more, ups the batting average a little bit. And all of a sudden, the Mets are a 96-win team. They are the number one challenger to the Los Angeles Dodgers. There's a few teams that I think have the potential to be the number one challenger to the Dodgers. The Mets, the Reds, the Cardinals, the Braves. Those are my front four to be the number one challenger to the Los Angeles Dodgers. And when you look at this type of rotation, the Mets could grab a playoff series off anybody. Anybody in baseball could get beat by the Mets in a 5-game series. Certainly. Certainly get beat by the Mets. In fact, I'd rather face the Mets in the NLCS to give yourself an extra 2 games because the types of arms they can put out on the mound can be any other set of arms in Major League Baseball. Truly. They have a really good rotation. Really good rotation. And the lineup's not half bad. That's why the Pacoda rankings have the Mets as an 88-win team, 74 losses, and project them to win the division. Roto World has them as 91-71 and project them to win the division as well. Now, my only worry in this whole thing for the New York Mets, and why I don't have them winning the division, why I have them losing the division by 1 game, I think the Mets will finish at 91-71, is I think Luis Rojas was thrown into a really tough situation, and it's New York. It's going to be tough. And I think there's a lot of questions that'll be asked early in the season that will be hard for the Mets to answer. I'm not sure Pete Alonso is going to do better than 53 home runs last year. I feel like there's some ceiling to the lineup. But the pitching staff is so good, and they do have some homers in the lineup, that I think they'll win 91 games. I think they'll be a good team. I don't think they'll be better than the Braves this year. They have the potential to win 96. I think they'll be the second wild card team. Well, they'll be the first wild card in the National League at 91-71. You've got Cy Young potential. Bullpen's great. Lineup can do well. Sounds like a 91-win team to me. If Luis Rojas had been named the manager at the beginning of the offseason, and that was kind of the choice, Rojas was the second choice for the Mets, and they had moved in that direction, and there wasn't any drama, there wasn't anything to discuss with the players, I think they'd win the division 93-94 wins. But with this Luis Rojas thing, it'll be rough. It's not easy in New York. Never is. A lot of questions. Every loss will be micromanaged. It'll be tougher on the players. And I think the Mets fall to 91 wins, 91-71. So that means the National League will finish like this, because we have finished the National League, folks. 15 segments. Boom. National League. It's done. It'll look like this. Dodgers, I think, will win 110 games and be the clear number 1 seed in the National League. So the Dodgers are the number 1 seed. The other division winners, the Reds at 91 wins, they'll be the 3 seed. The 2 seed, to me, will be the winner of the National League East, the Atlanta Braves at 92 wins. So you've got Dodgers, Braves, Reds. Your number 1 wild card team will be the New York Mets, and your number 2 wild card team is the St. Louis Cardinals. So there's your 5. Mets, Cardinals, that game's in New York. Jacob deGrom will be on the mound against, I believe, Carlos Martinez is probably how that will work out for the Cardinals. I'll go ahead and pick the Mets in that one. Let's just go ahead and do the playoffs. Pick the Mets. So then the Mets will play the Dodgers. And that's a dangerous matchup for the Los Angeles Dodgers. I'm going to be honest here. I want to pick the Mets against the Dodgers because the Dodgers have talked so much smack. They think that they won the World Series of 2017 now. That whole roster does. That I kind of worried about them in the postseason, but they're so good of a team, I'll pick the Dodgers in that matchup. Reds versus Braves. Old NL West matchup, I believe. Right? Reds versus Braves. Okay? I go ahead and say that the Reds win a playoff series. Something about it. Just got a feeling. So that sets up Reds-Dodgers, and I think the Dodgers win it and head to the World Series. And that's your National League. But if it's Mets-Reds, if the Mets get the Reds, I think the Reds get the Mets. I just don't see the Reds beating the Dodgers. Because you're going to have Trevor Bauer going up against Clayton Kershaw. And it just, the math doesn't work there for the Reds. And nobody on that roster has any real playoff experience outside of some of the players they brought in. And Joey Votto's playoff experience is zero because he's been so horrible every time the Reds are in the playoffs. But they're the 5. Dodgers, 1 seed. Braves, 2 seed. Reds, 3 seed. Mets, Cardinals, the 2 wild card teams in the National League. I think it's a good 5. I think it's solid. I think there's some surprises in there. The team that could come out of absolutely nowhere and win some games, I really don't see any team coming out of nowhere. Baseball feels like it's locked in, but it always feels like it's locked in at this point of the year. But cross off the Pirates, the Marlins, and the Giants. No runs coming from there. No Pirates, no Marlins, no Giants. I put them at 0.5% chance to make the playoffs. Oh, honestly, 0 in my eyes. And those are your 5 playoff teams. On the next show, we'll switch to the American League. We've got 3 more divisions to go through, 15 more teams to break down. Spring training games are right around the corner. By the time you're listening to this podcast, early next week, baseball will have been on your television. Isn't that exciting? It's exciting for me. Go ahead and give us a follow on Twitter at GSMC_baseball. Favorite, share, review, all those great things, the GSMC Baseball Podcast. And check out all the other great podcasts on the GSMC Podcast Network. This has been the GSMC Baseball Podcast on that same GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.